please mute unless you're asking a question.
Thank you, Frank, for coming and doing this for Women Painters West. I have known Frank for a long time in Palos Verdes, I think. And then we have been together also drawers for the San Diego Art Fair. And it was good to see him. Yes, a long time ago too. And so when Zoni said, "Oh, you should invite Frank," and I said, "Yes, I'm going to invite Frank." Okay, so, and I knew at that time that you were doing a lot of watercolor, but now you are doing a lot of oil paintings, and also the theme that you have decided to explain today. It's very interesting, but I think it's better if you speak because you are better than me for this. Okay.
Of course. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, first of all, Annie and everyone. I will, this is sort of a presentation of both my work and also other people's work. And I like to speak not only about the work itself, but also about the creative process in general, because it's a thing that's not being talked about too much, and it's a very good. It's not a technique; it's more like a state of being, and I want to elaborate on all that later. So it's basically a two-part thing. So the first part will be the art and a bit of a explanation. I can share my screen and show you images and so forth. And the second part will be the lecture about the creative process. And I'll get to that later. So let's start with the work itself.
Toby? Yeah, are you on?
Okay, everybody happy? Okay, I can share my screen. Let's try that and see how that works. Let me see. Here it goes. So can everybody see this image?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. So, first of all, my work is basically, you could say my work is all based on atmospheric perspective. So that is sort of the staple that holds my work together, so to speak. That is what I'm focusing on. And I'll show you what I mean in images, of course. But if you go to Wikipedia, aerial perspective is basically defined as follows. It refers to the effect of the atmosphere that has an appearance of an object as viewed from a distance. As the distance between an object and viewer increases, the contrast between the object and the background decreases, and the contrast of any markings or details within the object also decreases. So the color of the object also becomes less saturated and shifts towards the background color, which is usually bluish, but maybe under some color under certain conditions, also reddish, for instance, during a sunset. So this is the description that you find on Wikipedia, which I find very interesting, because they also mentioned Leonardo da Vinci, who was one of the first ones who explained this effect and actually used it in his work. And you can also see it in The Last Supper, if you look at the background. So that is a general description, obviously, but what I do really with my work is I actually use this effect, if you call it, in either way, whether it's further away, whether it's close, also within the object or within the painting, whether it's a closer object or further away, it doesn't make any difference. So if you're looking at my horse painting here, you can see this is a very obvious atmospheric perspective example because, you know, there's this cold air, the horse is breathing, so you see its breath there. The colors suggest early morning where the light is still cool. And you can see within the color changes here that I'm playing with this atmospheric perspective. Like the colors that jump out at you, like let's say around this horse's leg here, right? They feel closer because they're both warmer in temperature and also stronger than anything you might see back here, like for instance in this background, right? So that is a simple example of atmospheric perspective. And you can also see it within objects or not objects, like the let's say the horse's leg here. If you look at this section, I'm playing with color temperature here. Can you see that some of these parts in the legs have a warmer temperature compared to other parts in the legs that have a cooler temperature? So within the value range itself, they're the same, but the temperature changes. So that is also a way to suggest this effect. Okay, so you have two ways, the value and the temperature, meaning the color, what color, okay? So that is a very simple concept, but it's actually quite difficult to do because these colors that you see, let's say on a photograph, or even the camera, when you photograph a landscape, the camera is very bad at picking these things up. The human eye is much better. So if I take a photograph of a landscape, you don't see it much on the camera unless it's really, really, you know, like in a foggy scene, for instance, where it's really intense. So I'll show you a few other painters and show you how they do it. This is a painting by George Inness. You may have heard of him. Very famous painter, of course, long gone, 19th century painter. But look at the way he does the atmospheric perspective. Also, you could argue that these trees here are probably back there too. The only difference is they're further away, right? So how does he do it? What makes it look like they're further away? Atmospheric perspective. So if you look at these trees here, they have different colors in them that you don't see here. And again, in this case, the value range is not changing very much. The values pretty much stay the same, but the temperature is completely changing. So, you know, these greens here, these almost yellowish or brown, green browns, whatever you call these, you won't find them in the background. And look at this middle ground where the grass all of a sudden gets quite green. It's a nice contrast compared to the other colors around it. So I love this painting. It's very well done. So that's another very obvious example of atmospheric perspective. But there's also less obvious, like this one. Anybody knows who this is? Pretty. John Singer Sargent.
Really?
You may have heard of him.
Me?
Okay,
favorite.
look at the mountains in the background and see this intense color change here. Where the mountain basically connects to the sky, the whole mountain color changes. It is no longer this rock color. It basically goes almost to the sky blue, and the only thing that differentiates it from the sky is the value itself. It's much darker. And also he played with it here in the middle ground, where he put these cooler colors into the warm colors. And again, when you squint at the picture, you don't really see it, but it's there. And it makes all the difference. And look at this rock. Atmospheric perspective in the low, like in the immediate vicinity of us. I'm sure, you know, these colors in real life weren't all that intense there. You know, you would probably just see the shadow side of the rock and that's it with your blank eye. But Sargent had this vision that he's putting the sky into this rock. What's next to the rock, he's putting into it, and all in these deep shadows of the rock. So very interesting, very well done. Let's move on to another one. Here's a watercolor, a simple boat scene. That's one of mine. So here's a little different again. Why is there an atmosphere in this picture? Because I don't really use different colors back there. Well, what it is in this case, it's the reverse. In this case, the value is completely changing. So if you look at the value range in the front of the picture, compared to this back there, you have the whole range in the foreground, whereas in the background, all the values are pretty much the same. They don't change much. And they're very weak. So in other words, you know, you have the strong colors, values, I should say, not colors. You have the strong colors in the foreground and values, but you don't have them back here. So those are the ways you could play with the atmosphere in the atmospheric perspective. So both color and value. Let's just look at another one. This is a night scene. It's quite a large painting, 36 by 36.
Oh,
It's a street scene in San Francisco. And there's actually a person walking here too, if you can see him. And again, you know, I'm playing with both the value and the color. So even though if you look at this part, for instance, here where the person walks, you can see both warm and cool colors, even though it's right in front of us. So in real life, you don't have this effect so much. But if, like, you see these cool colors that I put here, these cool colors, they pick up on the background color here and the building color. And even in this middle ground here, you find these same colors. And that's another way to pull your painting together using these effects. So it's basically the atmospheric perspective hand in hand with the temperature in a painting. So, and I refer to temperature here because I don't really like to use the word color, because the color it makes you focus on a certain color you might have in your head, whereas the temperature is sort of what really determines how the color looks. And it's always determined by the context where the colors resides in. So you could say, you know, a certain color has a certain effect, mostly because what's around those colors. Or so that's often overlooked. People tend to, or students tend to mix colors and sort of put them on and then look for the next color, put them on and sort of see it all in isolation. So the real challenge is to make it look with, you know, in context of the whole painting. What does this color actually do? And that's why I like to call it temperature instead of color. And it's just a better way to think about it, especially when you mix through. So another one. This is one of my favorite painters. A woman, Carolyn Anderson. I don't know if you know her.
Mhm.
Very famous painter. She's an AIS master. I just love her work. And it's very loose, I know. But the key ingredient that she's so good at is to say so much with so little. It's almost incredible because if you squint at this picture, it's all there. You know, you see everything. But if you look up close, you know, is this really a horse? Right? Well, it is a horse because we have this horse here. You know, so you can do a lot by association. And of course, if you again look for the atmospheric perspective, it's all over the picture. You know, she's playing with this warm and cool sort of in and out effect in a masterly way, because obviously she's a master. So one day I hope I'll paint like that too. It's a very good example. Let's do one more of mine here. I have a seascape here that I painted a while ago, actually. What's interesting here is, you know, the composition is pretty clear. It comes in like a wave. But again, where's the atmospheric perspective? Compare this rock to these rocks, right? What's changing? Well, the color changes, but not that much. But the value changes in a very drastic way. Again, the rocks that sit in the branding there where the wave comes in, they're way weaker in value than what you would see, let's say, here. Even though this is not that far removed from the viewer, right? So it's a very interesting effect because the water, you know, when the water, the spray goes up, there's probably fog in the air. It's a very dense air at the sea in this intense light, foggy light. And that makes these rocks appear to be further away than they actually are, you know. So those are, well, those are all ways to do this. I like to do a few more. This one. This one, this is Edward Seago. So Edward Seago was a very famous watercolor artist, actually, but he also painted oils. This is one of his oils. I don't know if you know this, he's from England. He was from England, he's dead, but he taught Prince Charles watercolor, which is now King Charles, I guess. And so Charles was his student for many years. And from what I heard, the royal family owns most of his paintings, or a lot of them. But look at the example of atmospheric perspective in his work. You see the colors that he's using here compared to what's back there, right? Again, both value and color in this case. And I also love how he brings these building colors up into the sky. I think that's brilliant. It just shows how a very advanced painter he was. I just love his work. Seago, if you don't know him, Edward, he's very well known. And lastly, let's do one more and then well, do you want to see some more of mine?
Yes.
Okay, let's do
Yes.
the Yosemite
Yeah.
one, because this is like where I really went to town with atmospheric perspective on this watercolor, actually. This is a scene in Yosemite Valley, and you see the horses of the rangers there. And you can see I basically exaggerated everything I could possibly exaggerate, right? To make this really atmospheric. And I think this is a good example. Why is it so atmospheric? Well, in this case, the third thing comes in. I also played with the edges. If you look at the edges in the background, they have this sort of in and out feel to them. They're not really there, but they're still there enough so you can see what it is. But there's basically a lot of blurry stuff going on too. And intense light early morning. You have this barn back there that you barely see the barn. If it wasn't the roof, you wouldn't see anything. In fact, the barn completely merges with the landscape, right? And then kind of like what Carolyn does, are these really horses, right? Well, they are horses because this is here. That's the only reason. If this horse in the foreground wasn't there, you would not know what that is. But that's a good way to do it. You suggest it. And the suggestion is much more powerful than, let's say, you paint this photorealistic there. Because you're putting a third element into your work. You're basically making it mysterious. People want to take a closer look. They want to see, oh, what's going on here, right? It draws you into the picture more. That's why, I mean, that was for me one of the major reasons I wanted to learn how to paint these effects, this what nature has. So again, if you look transition wise, you look at this background here in the middle ground, objects seem to merge with each other, but again, there's warm and cool. Remember when I first started talking, the warm temperature next to the cool temperature. Here's warm, here's cool, right? There's warm and there's cool. This is warmer, this is cooler. So it goes through the whole picture. The more you can do that, and sometimes you have to invent it, the more of an impact your picture will have. And people don't know why, but it doesn't matter, because it's like watching a movie or listening to music. You get drawn in. You don't follow every single note of the music. You just, the act of listening is enough. You get, it can make you emotional, whatever. That's what art can do, and painting is no different. let's do this last one. This is also a famous painter. Let me see if I can get it a little bigger. No, okay. So this is Sorolla, a Spanish painter, also long gone. He was a contemporary of Sargent, I think. So he died early 20th century, basically. Look at the way he paints the water, like this section here. See the temperature changes, the fluctuations that very easy to miss. If you look at the whole picture, you don't even see it. But if you zoom in a little bit into certain sections, you see it everywhere all of a sudden. Even in the girl's dress here, warmer and cooler colors. You know, the guy here too. We got this cooler colors here, warmer colors here. Within the boat, it's a very, and then of course back here, you know, when it goes, it almost loses its color altogether, the water. It sort of merges with the sky. So by basically just adapting the color of the sky, and that's exactly what you see here too. Look, this color here is the sky color. Same here. In the girl's hair, the sky color. And that's how nature works. We don't sit in isolation. We are part of nature. We think we're not, but we are just as part of nature as anything else on this planet. So whatever you paint, if you think that way, you will paint it much better. There's no doubt about it. Okay. I think I'm ready for the second part of the of this demonstration. I also have a few videos where I show a bit of my painting process. So, but I want to get to this piece here. It starts with this one. And I wrote this up a little bit so we can all follow it as I talk. And this may be a little hard to understand for some, but it's okay. Just listen to it. So what I'm talking about here is the creative process that basically has to do with how we do it as artists, or how we do it as any creative person, let's say. This also applies to other art forms, anything creative in a way. So I call it Beyond Technique, how to access your own creativity. And the reason for that is a lot of people ask me, well, Frank, I've been painting for a couple of years. How do I find my own style? How do I create art that looks like my art? So this could be an answer to that question. Humans are all unique, so every one of us looks different. No matter how many of the 8 billion people you see, everybody has their own face, their own skills, talents, as I said here, origin. So it stands to reason that everybody is capable of their own unique creativity too. Okay? So, and the way the creative process works is a twofold way. Okay? We have two states of consciousness. One is the consciousness of doing, and the other is the consciousness of being. So now the Western world is very good at the left one, you know? We're very good at doing. We're not so good at being. And I say this with a grain of salt, but you know, it's actually true, because the doing part is sort of what you would call the left brain part of the brain. anything that's connected to intellect, ego, all the mind stuff, your thoughts, your beliefs, the analyzing, the judging, all these things, but also like the learning process when we learn something new, or the school, when we go to school, we learn about history, we learn knowledge. All these things are absolutely needed. But then there's also the right part, the state of being, that is sort of controlled by your feelings, your emotions. Also things like intuition, like if you think about that word, where does that come from? That's not a thought, right? So, and in a creative process, in art, whether it be music or painting or anything else, writing, that part is very important. So we basically need both, okay? But there has to be a balance. So how the balance is necessary because we need to be on both sides of the spectrum. And just to be clear, this state I'm talking about, and I'm explaining this further on the next page, this creativity is also the same as when you experience love, peace of mind. Those are all in that same state. Because, if you think about how love works, it's not something you decide to do. You fall in love. Even the language suggests that, it's not something you plan. It's something that happens. And the creative process, believe it or not, works exactly the same way. It happens. So, next page. So how does this process work? Well, over the years, I broke this down in a little bit into sections. How and when does one become original? Okay, so the first thing we always do when we paint, or before we even paint, is we're curious about a certain subject. We're intrigued. We want to paint a certain thing. We don't really know why, but we're just curious about it. It draws us in. And that, in turn, creates a sort of an enthusiasm, I call this. You get very excited about painting this subject. Okay? And then the next step is the step that's called inspiration. So this is the step where you not only decided to paint it, you have to paint it, and you already working on it in your head, exploring all the possibilities. How do I do it? So this is the pre-process of it. But this stage is very important because when you find this inspiration, you get to that creative state. Okay? And if you think about these words, enthusiasm, inspiration, again, they're not thoughts. That's not something you think. It's something that happens. These things go deeper. It's like saying, and I put this example here, I think I will feel very inspired tomorrow by 8 a.m. That doesn't really work, right? Does it? It doesn't, because it's not something you can decide to do. It's something you have to learn to get into a certain state of being so this can happen by itself. And this is the whole point of this lecture. Inspiration just happens. But the curiosity and enthusiasm will lead you there. And that's the process that gets it into motion, into the motion. Okay? So in other words, it's very much important what we think about all day long, right? And how we process information, let's say information from the outside. So some people, they watch the news all day long, and or they watch, which is mostly bad news, right? So that has an effect on yourself. So you have to be really conscious of what you're letting in, to have a certain way of thinking about life in general, and also about your art, because obviously it's all connected. If you're not in a good state of mind, you most likely won't create very well, let's say, or very dark. I mean, which could be a thing as well. But generally speaking, thoughts can be beneficial or non-beneficial. And this is what I wrote here. Thoughts that can be distracting, and then thoughts that are more positive. Okay? So any form of fear will work against you. Any form of judgment, thoughts about the future, thoughts about the past, any form of comparison. And I'm talking about, we all have these thoughts, obviously. But when you're creating, when you want to paint, you have to stop these thoughts. You have to find stillness. And if you find stillness in your mind, stillness in your head, then you can create. Then that creative potential that's personally yours is available. And if you have these thoughts that are distracting, or call them non-beneficial, you won't get there. It won't happen. Okay? Now the next page. Now, what's the state like? Okay, I call it, it's when, and you all have had it before, I'm certain. When you paint, or when you're on a walk in nature, or whatever you're doing, somewhere out on the beach, looking at the ocean, you're completely absorbed in what you're doing in the here and now. Okay, the painting sort of happens by itself. It's almost like when you're done at the end, you're like, ask yourself, well, how did I do that? You can't really remember how you did it. And that's because the you wasn't really there. You had that quiet state of mind where you just create, and it just happened. And writers call it, they say the book wrote itself, or the chapter wrote itself. You may have heard writers say that before. So this is the state you want to be in. So how do we do it? Well, it's not something you can just decide to do, like I said earlier. You have to get yourself into a certain state of being for this state to happen. And there's a few things you can do, actually. I personally have a sort of a pre-painting routine where I mix my colors up. I squeeze out my palette. I clear my head. I do breathing exercises. That really helps, focusing on your breath going in and out. I also do other things throughout the day. A good exercise is also during the course of your day, when you're really busy and focused on things, you just take a time out for like a minute and sit somewhere still and just think nothing. Just for a minute.
Yes.
It makes all the difference. So those are ideas to do it. Also, physical exercise can help a lot. If you can do it, like running, the gym, Tai Chi, whatever, walk in nature, walk on the beach. There's so many things you can do. So those are a couple ideas. Now, remember, this is not something, I was going to say, I sound like I got it all figured out, but let me just be clear. I'm a work in progress too, okay? This is one of the hardest things you can ever learn in your life, actually, because it takes a huge amount of awareness when you actually start thinking all these non-beneficial things. Most people, they don't even notice it, when their mind trails off. And most people really live with this chatter in their head 24/7 almost. So, but if you really want to be more creative, paint better works, this can benefit you a lot. Because it opens this door to creativity. And it really makes a difference. You'll see it in your work. You see it in the way you feel, in the way you go about your life. It has a good an effect on everything and anything. So this is what I call the creative process. And I know we can have question and Q&A too, right? Is there time for that? I would like to show a few of my painting movies here.
That's fine. I know we started late, so if we run a little late, then that's fine.
Okay. Let me see if I can open this directly. What do you see right now? Do you see my file?
Your
First
notes.
page of writing.
Still your notes.
The notes. Okay, thank you. So I need to stop share. And open. So I have a few short movies just so you see, the left brain things, a couple of techniques, that sort of thing. Let me see if I can share.
Weird.
Here we go.
Oh, nice.
So there's sort of a painting in progress, and you can see I let this loop for a bit. I'm using my painting knife quite a bit, so I'm applying a lot of paint. So I love the textural part in oil painting where you just really put thick paint on. So this is just a short demonstration, but I have a few others. And I have one in regular speed too. So, but you get an idea of how I apply paint. So if you look at this orange part here, that's my underpainting here on the canvas or on the board. I prefer working on canvas panels actually. I think since I'm using other tools than paintbrushes, I don't like the give that the canvas has. The canvas, when you push into it, it kind of gives. I actually hate that. So I prefer the boards for that reason. And because you can use other tools than just the brush. Not only painting knife, I also use drywall tools for bigger paintings. You have like spatulas that are like 10, 15 inches long to apply paint. So, and again, at that size, you cannot have give in the canvas because you couldn't apply the paint. Okay. Let's do another one. So, how about this one? There we go. So this is a little landscape. And again, I'm putting these buildings into the landscape in a very gestural way. You can see this is a background hill here, and then we have a foreground with olive trees, and then in the middle ground sits this town. It's a French scene, actually. You know, another one of those 1,000-year-old towns they have over there. And you can get a pretty good idea of how I do this. So I basically paint the trees first, and then I go in with the buildings, and then I go back to the trees and kind of like get edges like that, or get rid of edges like that. So either way, and make it more connected into the scene. Do another one. Let's do one that's a little longer. Let's see.
Frank, can I ask
Of course.
why, while you've shifted to oil and opaque media while doing watercolors, what is your main focus now? I mean, is it both or?
That's a very good question. It is kind of both. I do like watercolor for its immediacy. It's a very fast medium. And it has a certain look that's appealing, but it also has a lot of limitations. So, and for me, for the limitations were always the thing that kind of like made me go back to oil painting more, because, and it's not only the size of watercolors, because once you're talking about 36, 40 inches, you know, you're rolling up this huge thing.
Yeah.
It just, and then putting the paints on, it's just very difficult, right?
Right, right.
And to me, watercolor is a little, how should I explain this? It's too techy. It's a medium that's very technique based, okay? Whereas in oil, you can, the technique is important too, but you have a lot more freedom to explore.
Layer, yeah.
Whereas in watercolor, you're very limited, because if you do it wrong, then it's not going to work out, right? So that's sort of a limitation that always bothered me, because by nature, I like to experiment more. And when I experiment in watercolor, I just ruin a watercolor, basically, right?
Mhm.
And when I experiment in oil or other medium, it might lead me to something else, you know, just by staying with it, working with it, and all of a sudden discovering something else, right? Accidentally. Or in watercolor, you can't really do that. There's a place for watercolor, but and a lot of the best painters in history have done both. So I mean, I love Sargent's work in watercolor, but he did them for fun, you know. It's his main work was in oil, you know,
Mhm.
and Zorn was the same, and Siegel was a watercolor artist, but look at his oils. Oh my God. I mean, so it's like, if you can do more than one medium, in my opinion, you learn painting better. You
Right.
learn more about painting. It does teach you many other things that you can also sort of bring a little bit over here, bring a little bit from that over here, you know. Um, you might find some other way to apply paint, or you know, even little things. So yeah, it's that's I hope that answers the question.
Thank
But
you. Yes, yes.
here I'm just this is the regular speed, so I'm just lightening this foreground up a little. So putting these pigments here in the foreground. This is really what I'm working on right now, actually. I was working on this morning. So this is this doesn't make sense from this perspective, but there's a road. It's basically a street scene, an urban scene again. That's sort of downhill, cars parked left and right, and then we got the sun on the top of the building only, and in the foreground, it's completely in the shadows. So we're looking at the shadow part right now. And I show you how I paint this car in here. I'm gonna let this run for a bit if we have the time. I have to move it a little more. There we go. So these are the cars parked left and right. And if you see this texture on the canvas here, on the panel, that's something I did before I started painting. So I added some I added some textural parts with gesso. So you may see some things there. And you can see by the way I work here is it's very integrated, you know, it's almost like a clay modeling kind of thing. I'm not painting anything separate. I'm painting the background with the foreground with the object. So in my workshop, I always teach to not even name things. If you name something, you already lost the connection to it because it's a human concept about it. And as long as you have a concept in your head, you're not going to paint it right. So that's why I don't call a car a car. It's just a shape. Uh, and, you know, it interacts with other shapes on the street. And street is another word, right? So you see the problem with language often. We have to use language to communicate. But in painting, we don't need this kind of communication because painting works differently, you know. You don't really uh, name these things because it's not helpful to name them. Because the way you grow up, you have a concept in your head of what a car looks like, what a building looks like, what a street looks like. But that's not what it looks like in real life. In real life, you just look there and see what is there and what is next to it, and that's how you paint it, you know. And then in the end, it may look like something you know, but that's the better approach because then you get the object, you paint it in a way that's much more real all of a sudden. It's kind of almost like a contradiction, actually.
Still waiting to see a car.
Right? You still don't see it. I know. I can fast forward a little.
Thank you. I'm glad it's not just me.
Wow.
I see the car.
Yeah.
It's coming. And I paint the one next to it too, behind.
Oh,
Now I see the car.
See it? It picks up the light from above. And
I love
look,
that concept.
it's not really, it's you know, there's still work to it to be done, but it's already, the basic shape is there. And it's completely immersed in the background. It's kind of moving, it's coming out of the background, so to speak. And I literally like to think of painting like clay, like you model it, like when you do a clay figure, or you know, they work the same way. In the beginning, it's like a block of nothing, right? What is this? You know, and then as they work, you start, oh my God, there's an arm, you know, or you start seeing things, right? And all of a sudden you see, you know, wheels here. Oh, oops, how did they happen? Well, you know, that's the best way for me to paint. You can see it now, right?
Yes. Wow.
just a small example.
It's beautiful.
What size is that painting?
That's a square 18 by 18. So it's not really large or anything, but so in the lower left, this is actually the end of the painting. So, you know, this is by no means any focal point or anything. It's just, but it's a very important spot in the picture.
Frank, it seems to me that what you're talking about is a very abstract idea of painting the idea and painting just the shapes. And I think about what you're doing here and then the horse and rider that you had at the very first image that you showed. And you almost breathe that sense of breath out that horse was doing as you are, you know, as you're creating it. And
Yeah.
and I could feel, you know, just the clop of the heat of the hoof as that horse was moving through the track area. It's such a beautiful expression.
Well, thank you. I really like hearing that because that's really what I feel too when I paint these things. And I think that's one of the most important things to paint them well because you know, you pick up on this energy basically. And I try to paint this energy. I'm not really interested in painting this type of car, right? Or you know what I mean? Or that type of horse, the way the horse should really be a thoroughbred or whatever it was, right? I'm not interested in those things. I like to see I like to paint the life of it, you know, the life, what do you
Yeah.
call it?
You're painting the
Essence.
soul of
Yeah, the essence, the life
The essence.
force maybe, or I don't know. It's hard
Well,
to put in words.
it's kind of like one of the things I tell my beginning students. The only time you fail in a painting is when you show it to somebody and they say, "What is it?" Then you know you didn't hit it.
Yeah. That's true. If it's unrecognizable,
At the end.
obviously, then yeah, you know, and within the genre of representational painting, let's say, but yeah, there has to be something there that's recognizable, and that's why, I mean, unless you're an abstract painter, of course, but that's a whole different thing again. But see, putting these touches there and really creates this light on the car. And if you know, you see how little information, I mean, obviously I painted hundreds of cars, right? Probably hundreds at least. And I know exactly what needs to go there and what I can let go of, right? So
Is this out of your imagination, or do you have a photograph of this?
I do have a photograph, but it looks very different. Well, the photograph has the light in it. It has the same light because that's why I was basically attracted to that light play between the top of the buildings and the deep shadows on the bottom. So that's why I picked the picture. You could call this car, it's just a supporting actor, so to speak, right?
Beautiful.
Do you do studies before you start to do a larger piece?
I often do, yes, especially for the larger pieces.
Value study or a sketch?
Well, it's basically both two different words for the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I like to, if I don't, let's say I figure out certain light situations, I will do a small painting first, like a 6x6 or something. It's a square. And I do that to find out, is that worth a painting, so to speak, right? Is this enough? Is this enough to merit a big painting? And you see it right away, you know, because oftentimes when you have you can also do that with your photographs. When you have a folder on your computer, don't open the photographs. Just look at the thumbnails. scroll through all the thumbnails, and the one that catches you, that's the one you want to paint.
Mhm.
Because it has this, there's something about it that works that small, right? It most likely will work large too. So I do that a lot, actually, in my photos. Because a lot of times you open a picture and you see something, oh, this looks so beautiful, this light. And this happened to me so many times. And then I paint it and like, doesn't really work. What happened, right? Well, because I only focused on a certain part that was good about the picture. The rest wasn't so good. So
Which area of town is this, or what place?
that's Sutter Street in San Fran. You know
Oh,
where the Carlton is? You know the area at all?
yes.
It's a very the Carlton is on the right. I love Sutter because it goes up and it
Yeah.
has in the background it has the skyscrapers from downtown, and then in the foreground you have these lower buildings. So it always makes for good scenes. Up, down, downward view and upward view. So both ways. So you can see I'm done here with the car. This is it.
Fabulous.
So
Beautiful.
Do you
just
have a series that you like to paint, like a bunch of cars, pictures, or just towns that you like to
yeah,
paint? And then
yeah.
you decide which area you're going to be working on that week.
I often do that. Yeah. When I paint, like right now I'm painting urban scenes. Like I have a lot of pictures. So I'm piecing together these pictures, trying to find these scenes. Before I was all into horses, so all these horse pictures, and it depends also where you travel to or what you pick up, where you inspired by. There you go. The inspiration is really a big thing, right?
You don't do people that much.
I did. I used to. Not right now, though. No.
Mhm.
It'll come back. Yeah. Keep it interesting. I like to do all kinds of subject matters. I think the more different subject matters you do, the better painter you become. I really believe that.
Do you ever do collages at all?
No, never really done collages, no. I've done with abstract paintings, I experiment with those. But I haven't really produced anything I really like. I was certainly one of the paintings, one of the artists, and this is my background because I used to be an illustrator, and back in the 90s we were in the studio and we painted all these things. Um, it had to be tight and it had to be realistic. And to get away from that is so hard. It took me like decades, actually, even to be able to paint like I paint now. It's like huge. Like even 10, 15 years ago, I would have painted everything on that car. And it's like the longer you paint, the more you evolve into probably away from the realism. I think I see that in a lot of artists, even famous artists. If you look back in history, like Picasso or people like that have really big names, they at one point they were tight painters, realistic painters.
Do you have a favorite painting of your own, one that's like, oh, I love that so much, I'm never going to part with it? Or that you sold it and you thought, I wish I never sold it?
Oh yeah, that happened to me quite a few times.
Everyone, I think.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I did. I did sell a few that I should have never sold, both watercolors and some oils too, but and then you sell them too cheaply, it's like and then you realize, why did I do that? But I think it's all part of it, like some of you just said. Happens to all of us.
Yeah.
You don't have an agent?
No, I that would be helpful. Yeah.
Where do you
No,
sell your work?
I have a couple galleries. Actually, I'm pretty excited because I just got into a new gallery in Kentucky, and they do it's all about horse paintings, the whole gallery. It's called the Crossgate Gallery, and they've been in business for 50 years. So it's a really old established gallery, and they contacted me and they loved my horse paintings. And the interesting part about that gallery is they also travel around to thoroughbred events around the country and they take the art. It's a very different concept for a gallery. And the owner talked to me about it. He said even from the very beginning, he opened the gallery and like most galleries, they open a gallery and then they wait for the customer, right? To walk in. And they had the opposite approach. They went to the customer, everywhere the customer is. And then everybody goes to Kentucky that is in that business because that's where they breed all the horses. So sooner or later, if they even don't sell anything at the events, when they come to Kentucky, they come to the gallery.
And
So
are you hoping to get a lot of commissions out of that too?
yeah, I do
Yeah,
commissions in the
yes.
heartbeat, especially horses. Oh my God, sure. But I'm hoping because the owner was very interested in my work because he said, I'm not painting a race scene or a guy with a horse, or the horse for the horse's sake. It's a whole different approach. You remember my first painting I showed you, I actually cut the rider off, right? It was cropped off on the top. And really, you just saw part of the horse. And he's like, wow, I've never seen that before. So he really liked that. So a little different than what you usually see. And a lot of people paint these, the race scenes, Santa Anita and whatnot, or the fox hunting and those old British paintings that are out there, Stoddard, or what was the names? I can't remember.
Joseph
But
Stoddard.
yeah, like really famous 19th century artists that painted a lot of these fox hunting scenes and they have the whole gallery is full of it. So my work is definitely going to be different.
You almost
Frank,
captured a moment. Yours is just a time, a moment, a feeling, as
Exactly.
opposed to a scene.
And
So-
that's what I really want to do, paint that feeling, that's what I want to do. That's like my whole goal. It's like a lifetime pursuit, really.
Do you
Frank,
spend the whole day on one painting or do you mix it up?
Usually I paint on one painting, yeah, but I might paint on another one tomorrow. But usually what I did before, I switched from watercolor to oil and back to watercolor. I did that before. That's kind of trippy too, because it's so different. You have to, but I never had a problem. Some people they say, well, how do you do that? But it's just technique. You
Yeah.
just flip the switch.
Do you use acrylic at all?
I've used acrylic before, yes, but I prefer oil. I do. It looks better.
Frank, when
Yes.
when you're working and painting for galleries, I want to go back to some of the notes that you were presenting earlier about
Uh-huh.
where your mindset needs to be and that quiet and not having the chatter going on. How do you navigate the chatter of, oh, this is going to go to this gallery, so it has to be X, and yet and then be able to dial that back so that you stay more present too and try to stay in that flow better?
You almost answered your own question. I mean, way you have to do it, you don't treat it any differently just because it goes to a gallery, first of all. It's your work, you paint the way you paint, and no matter who gets it, that's after. We're in the present, we're painting. So you really have to learn to stay here and now and just focus on what you're doing. And if your mind wanders off, you bring it back to what you're doing. And I know it sounds very simple. In theory, it is, but it's very hard to do. I understand that. And obviously it happens to me too. Then you get a text message, then the phone rings or whatever. There's always something. But I gotta tell you, if I paint or the dog wants something, like right now, there's tons of distractions all the time. So this is Archer.
Oh,
So
This
cute.
is Archer.
Archer.
See the dog.
But you get distracted all the time. So you really have to focus. You have to learn to just stay in the moment. And the more you do it, the better you get. So don't think about the outcome, and if it's good or bad, that's already a distraction. Where it goes after you're done, how you frame it, all these things. And when you paint, you just paint. Sounds simple enough, right?
Yeah, got it. No, that makes great sense. Thank you.
You
You're
paint
welcome.
daily.
I try to paint daily. Some days you can't, but I usually do. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then I have days where I go outside painting. So yeah, my life is basically all about painting. But you see, I like to have it that way, so it's not something that I do because I feel, I have to do this. I don't. It's a choice. So I want to do that. And I feel the happiest when I'm painting because it takes me out of this ordinary
Mhm.
existence. And I'm sure that's why you guys are painting too, or part of the reason.
Do you have any books out of your work?
I have nothing at this point. No, no. I've been thinking about doing that, but I will, but at this point, nothing yet. No. I'm thinking of doing a little bit of these concepts I talked to you about today. I've actually got like a little booklet. I'm thinking of putting that on my website and maybe sell it for a fee or something. Because I think it's really important for artists to sort of learn this, or I mean, if most artists actually do it already, or many, because that's part of the creative personality you already have. Otherwise, you wouldn't be an artist, obviously. But to make it conscious and be aware of this, how it actually works, I think it's really helpful. Any other
Any
questions?
other questions? Yes. Anyone else?
What is the website?
My website is just my name, frankeber.com.
Okay, anyone else? Any questions for Frank?
What town do you live in?
The town is Paso Robles, Central Coast.
Nice.
What I like
Okay.
best about this, Frank, was definitely listening to you and all the points you were making. But one of the things that we don't usually do, and I really enjoyed it today, was watching you paint and how
Yes,
the little
me too.
touches that you made was fascinating. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was
Thank
really
you. Well,
special. Yes.
Yeah.
glad I did that because I thought I should show a little bit of the process and, oh, good. Thank you for saying that.
When you invented the car, that was wonderful.
Yes. We finally saw it. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Last chance. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.